Welcome to Brattleboro's Town Matters podcast. This podcast is a brief update on what's happening in Brattleboro town government. I'm your host, Town Manager John Potter, broadcasting from the BCTV studios in Brattleboro, Vermont. Today we're going to look back at what happened at the January 21st Brattleboro Select Board meeting, and then we'll do a review of the agendas for the upcoming meetings on Tuesday, January 28th and Tuesday, February 4th. The board met on January 21st, and this is what happened. They had 3 items on the consent agenda. There was an entertainment license renewal with updated hours for the Retreat Farm, a change order number 8, which was for $1,319.43 for the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility project. And finally, a parade permit for the Women's March. And these 3 items were all approved on consent by a vote of 5-0. Next, under old business, the board did a 3rd reading of changes to Chapter 15, the Downtown Improvement District Ordinance. Planning Director Sue Fillion presented several changes that were discussed during the 2nd reading at a previous select board meeting, and there was a motion to adopt the changes to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Chapter 15 Municipal Act, to establish and regulate the Downtown Improvement Act, and that passed by a vote of 5-0 as presented. Next, the Select Board took up the FY26 General Fund budget and capital plan. First off, I made a presentation regarding what is in the FY26 budget. And this budget is about the policies and priorities that the Select Board had chosen this past year. The first area of significance in this budget is addressing the quality of life in downtown, where throughout the summer and into the fall, the Select Board heard repeatedly about challenges that everyday folks are facing downtown in Brattleboro. And they came up with a downtown safety action plan that was approved and funded for last fiscal year. And now that is in this budget for consideration moving forward. And there are many things that this approach does, which should make a very positive difference for downtown Brattleboro. The second big area of change in the FY26 budget is implementing a new contract for solid waste collection and disposal services, replacing a legacy contract that had been in place for many years and was very outdated, and the whole approach to solid waste is now going to be modernized through the town's contract with Casella Waste Systems. Both of those things led to an increase in the FY26 budget that had to be balanced with a number of reductions that the Select Board considered. They found almost $2 million in savings elsewhere in the budget to help fund those policy changes. They also made a point of not eroding many of the essential services that people have come to expect from municipal government in Brattleboro, and so managed to put together this budget that they considered without reducing the services that people depend on every day. There was significant discussion at the meeting, and anyone who's interested should check out the video on BCTV. But in the end, the board moved to approve the FY26 Select Board General Fund budget and capital plan as presented, and that passed by a vote of 5-0. Next, under new business, for the January 21st meeting, the board looked at draft warnings for the annual town meeting. That is what will be on the ballot on March 4th, and the draft warning for the representative town meeting for the representatives to meet on March 22nd. They primarily focused their discussion on several articles for the ballot. One of those involved overdose prevention centers, also called safe injection sites. Another set of 2 related to hearing from the public about their feelings on ordinances regarding acceptable behavior and high response properties. And the last one they spent a fair amount of time discussing was a potential article around human services funding. And the board passed several motions, which I won't read all of them, but they will result in in a draft warning, which will come before the board on their next meeting on January 28th, which I'll talk about in a second. And that was the final item on their January 21st meeting. The next select board meeting is a regular meeting scheduled for Tuesday, January 28th at 6:15 p.m. in the select board meeting room at 230 Main Street. And this is what will be on that agenda. There's no executive session, so the meeting will start at 6:15, and there is on the consent agenda 4 items. The first is ratifying appointments for representative town meeting, including appointing Hillary Francis as town clerk, Fisher and Fisher as town attorney, and assistant treasurer Leslie Smith as the interim town treasurer. Also on the consent agenda is consideration for approval of a $41,475 agreement with the state VTrans on a utility agreement related to paving next year. Also on the consent is assignment of a liaison to the State Ethics Commission for the town to help implement an act that was passed in the last legislative session around municipal ethics. And then finally on the consent agenda is a parade permit for the Asian Cultural Center's annual parade to celebrate the Chinese New Year. The only other item on the board's agenda for January 28th is to warn the annual town meeting, that's the ballot vote, and to also warn the representative town meeting for March 22nd. They will take up many of those items that I reported on for you from their January 21st meeting for a final consideration and a vote. The board is holding a regular meeting on Tuesday, February 4th. At this meeting, there will be 9 items on consent. The first is a settlement stipulation with Walgreens. I believe that's regarding an assessment. And then acceptance of the assessor's office's certificate of no appeal on the grand list. The third item is request to apply for a downtown transportation grant to do improvements on Bridge Street right next to the museum. The fourth item is a parade permit for the Windham County Humane Society's Walk for Animals. There is a fifth item, the annual certification of highway mileage for the town that needs to be filed with the state. And then several acceptances and appropriations of grant awards that the town has received. So the consent agenda will be whether to accept those. One is for $20,080 for the FY25 Better Roads Grant. One is for $120,000 for the FY25 VTrans Town Highway Class 2 Paving Grant. And finally, the $200,000 from the FY25 VTrans Town Highway Structures Grant. And then the final item on the consent agenda is consideration of a limited event permit approval for the Winston Prouty Bingo Night to be held on March 20th. Following consideration of the consent agenda, the board will take up 4 items under old business. The first will be a utility rate study. That is something that the board discussed when they approved the utility budget last spring. They asked that staff look into doing a study about how and how much that the town sets their utility rates. So if you're interested in water or sewer rates, this is a great meeting to attend to kick off that project and to hear what the consultants will be doing in terms of looking at utility rates for Brattleboro. Next, the board will get a quarterly update on implementation of the Downtown Safety Action Plan. The board will get a quarterly update from the fire department, hearing about how things have been going there with implementation of the ambulance service. And finally, on the board's agenda for February 4th is the quarterly update from the finance department on the budget for FY25, this year's budget, through quarter 2. I have a few announcements The assessor's office is now accepting business license renewals for 2025. Business owners can renew a license or apply for a new license online at brattleboro.gov. Business licenses must be renewed each year by March 15th. The cost of renewal is $50. After April 15th, the cost increases to $175. So get those done by April 15th. Beginning February 3rd, the Brattleboro Town Clerk's Office will be closed from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. on a daily basis for efficiency during the early voting period. Voters may now request absentee ballots for the March 4th election. They can do that through the state's My Voter page at mvp.vermont.gov or by contacting the town clerk's office. Ballots will be mailed in mid-February and in-person early voting will begin shortly thereafter. Visit brattleboro.gov for updates about voting this March. Dog licenses for 2025 are now available. Dog owners should have received renewal notices in the mail. If you're renewing online, please be sure to follow the instructions that were mailed to you and claim your record for renewal rather than having to create a whole new record in the system. The town's website has in-depth guides for using the online portal for dog licensing. And finally, the Charter Revision Commission is inviting the public to a discussion about Brattleboro's annual representative town meeting. Join them on Thursday, February 6th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Brooks Memorial Library. This event will also be live streamed on BCTV. Visit the town's blog at brattleboro.gov for background information about the commission's work to date, along with frequently asked questions that can help prepare you for this event on February 6th. So that is your update on what is happening in town government in Brattleboro. Please reach out to me at the town manager's office if you have any suggestions or want to discuss any of these matters further. There's lots of additional information on the website, brattleboro.gov, about what's discussed at the select board meetings. So please check in there for agendas, reports, and backup materials for all these agenda items we've been discussing. Appreciate all the listeners. Tune in again soon.